And he said, yeah, I mean 2x4s. He said, all right, how long do you need them? The customer paused for a minute and said, wait a minute, I'll go check. And after a while, the customer returned to the office and said, a long time, we're going to build a house. You know, sometimes we don't get our communication right. We're not both talking about the same thing. My dad was a Depression-raised man. He started hoeing corn at Berea College when he was 10 years old. I was the last of 8 kids. Born in 1947, I discovered America. And I suppose when he came, when I came, we were kind of passing in the dark because I really didn't know him. I grew up around him, but I've already talked to you more since I've been standing up here than I did my dad ever in my life in a running conversation. I didn't like him, and the reason was he scared me. How many know you don't scare you don't like what you're afraid of? And so when I was growing up, I hit the 50s and 60s at the very worst time that could possibly be. He's tired and I'm full of energy. And so we kind of passed each other in the dark. We didn't, as far as I was concerned, he wasn't hip. He didn't really know what was going on. You know, he was a little behind times, you know. I'd see them old pictures of him. I saw a couple old pictures from the 20s. At the end of the 20s, we'd have that big cap on and like bell-bottom pants. And I thought that was the closest thing I ever saw to being hip, because in the 60s, the bell-bottom pants came back. So I ran away. And I remember when he'd come home drinking when I was a young guy. My dad was a hard-working man. And don't get me wrong, this story's got a good ending to it. But sometimes parents don't connect. You know, in the 70s, when Timothy O'Leary, the acid professor, said we should tune in, turn on, and drop out. Does anybody remember that? And that's where the statement was created: if it feels good, do it. And so we all did it. We rebelled against everything that seemed right that happened from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. That's why we call the 50s the happy days. How many remember the happy days when you could leave your door open? You know, you go to sleep at night and not worry about locking nothing up, where everybody truly felt like your neighbor, where Gene Autry, Roy Rogers, the Cisco Kid, and Gabby Hayes, and all them guys, Red Ryder, they ruled. Come on, somebody from the 50s say amen. So we had a kind of a joyous period there. And I was pretty cool in that period up till I was about 10 or 11 years old. I turned 13 years old in 1960. In 1960, I decided I was smarter than my dad. Y'all remember that day? Remember when you got smarter than your dad? Anybody remember that? You know, how many ever saw that poster said, teenagers, leave now while you're still smarter than your parents? How many's ever seen that? Because something happens when we get to a particular period in our youth where we think that we know more than everybody else around us. So because my dad was busy, and my mother was like walking mercy, and I was the baby. So having the mercy gifts and being the baby, I got whatever I wanted from Mommy. I got occasional whipping every now and then. But when my dad cleared his throat, I cleared the room. If my dad went, I just got up and left. I remember when I was a young guy, I was clumsy. And I'd sit down at the kitchen table, or we'd be eating. I remember knocking something over, and he'd give me that look. And he'd literally say sometimes, get out in the backyard till I get done eating, because it would aggravate him. Well, I remember that scared me so bad when I was about 19. I was helping him put a porch on our farmhouse over in Indiana. And I remember my mother had made dinner, and a big pitcher of Kool-Aid she put on the table. I'm 19 years old now. And I turned around to do something. I knocked that whole pitcher of Kool-Aid over in his lap. I said, no, never mind. I know what to do. I'm going in the backyard, just messing with him. But we had this contentious relationship. I don't blame him. The reason I didn't blame him is my dad, I believe my grandma was married 4 or 5 times. My dad's dad died when he was 6 months old. So he never had, see, the Bible says, such as I have, give I to thee. So sometimes kids are expecting something to come to them that person literally don't have. They can't give them what they don't have. So it creates this frustration between not getting able to get what we need and thinking the world can give it to us. Come on, I'm preaching better than you acting. So I started deciding early, I'm getting out of here. So I started hanging out with guys that were older than me. And I finally figured it out after years and years and years, the 2 things I wanted. I wanted a male in my life that I could connect with, and I wanted a woman that can love me like my mother. Because your mother and father affect you so much, either inherently by the genes or by being with them, that when I grew up, I thought smacking a woman was part of being a man. I did. You get out of line, bam. So I fought my way around with women trying to rough them up. You say, why'd you do that? I said, well, it just seemed like where I was raised that women were subject to men. Not just my dad, but I saw many cases of that at different times where I was raised at. And so when I started having babies, I did not know what to do. Anybody else here know what I'm talking about? I didn't know the importance of them. I didn't understand the privilege of them. How many understand that having kids, the Bible calls it a privilege? It said a man that has them, it's like having a quiver full of arrows. And an arrow was a weapon of war. You know, the fact that Isaac and Jacob had 12 sons. Man, that's what made him who he was. So there's things that have to happen between a child and a father. And you young fathers, listen to me, because they're literally, you have an opportunity there to put anything in that baby that you want in there. You got an opportunity. That is a life being formed. It's why I read this little thing by, how many grandpas in here? How many grandpas in here? How many know grandpas are different than daddies? Come on, say amen. I was reading something Bill Cosby said here about his. Said Bill Cosby in his book Fatherhood. He writes, "Now that my father's a grandfather, he just can't wait to give money to my kids. But when I was a kid, if I asked him for 50 cents, he would tell me his life history. How he got up at 5 a.m. when he was 7 years old, walked 23 miles to milk 90 cows, and the farmer whom he worked for didn't even have a bucket. He had to squirt the milk in his hand, walk 8 miles to the nearest can, all for 5 cents a month. That result was I never got my 50 cents. I'm a grandpa and I can say amen. But when you become a grandpa, you reach a whole nother, that's why they call us grand. Amen. And if you had, now I've got 2 great grandchildren. So I'm not only grand, I'm great. But when you're a daddy, you have the possibility to impart into that life anything you want.